Hello, 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 amazing trailblazers. I'm so excited to be here with you for another free training from the Institute for Female Trailblazers. For those of you who are new, which I know that there are some, welcome, welcome. You are in amazing hands with myself and my team. You'll see that Renee McClure is your success advisor. So she's going to be in there. She's going to be with you. She's going to be making sure that you have everything that you need, whether you're in the group for Women on the Rise or if you are attending this training, we are here to support you. There is a handout. So if you want the handout, be sure to put handout, please, in the comments, and we will get it to you if we have not already. So that takes care of some of that housekeeping. So, all right, let's go. I know that today's topic is a little challenging. When you come in, make sure to say hello in the chat. We love to see who's here. We love to connect with you. And it's so cool for all of the women to see everybody that's here from all over the world. We truly are global here. So it's great to know who is active and who's in the chats so that you guys can actually connect with each other as well, which brings me to a really exciting news for you guys is that something that you have all been asking for and Renee and I have been chatting about is that we are actually going to begin more of like a networking group every single month. So one time a month, it's the third Monday of every single month. We are going to have that available to you. It is going to be a special Zoom room. So we will be on camera. We will be talking to each other. This is just going to enhance your experience of connecting with each other and expand your network. So we're so excited to be able to do that for you and to create the space for that. So that's why you want to put hello and where you're coming in from in the chat. So where are you coming in from? Again, we have women from all over the world. So it's really beautiful for you all to connect. Like-minded people are so important to have in your life. I always call it like-hearted and like-minded people are so important to create that space around you as you're growing and expanding in your mission, in your dreams. The more people that you can surround yourself with for support, the better the outcomes and the better you feel. So who's with me? Put a yes in the comments. So the other thing that I want to make sure that you're in the right space. I'm pretty sure you are, but really this is a space for women with big visions and a big mission to change your life, your family's life, your community, and the world. So if that's you, put a yes in the comments, right? And being able to really embrace that and own it, own the fact that like you are a female trailblazer, you are a visionary, you have this big mission and big dream for again, it's your life and it is, in your community and in your family. So I was just talking to someone earlier today and my belief, my knowledge is that if you didn't have this dream, like you wouldn't have this dream, this vision, sometimes we feel unfulfilled. And then we have this idea of just like, oh my gosh, this is what's possible. This is what could be possible. And being able to recognize that you have this vision, you have this mission, it was laid on your heart, laid on your soul for a reason, and if it wasn't meant for you, it wouldn't be there. So just reinforcing that when you have this like moment of clarity of just like, oh my gosh, this is what's possible and this is what my heart wants to do and this is what aligns with my soul, that is your indicator to research more into it, to really stay curious about it, and just align with the possibilities rather than the limitations. So enough about that. We are going to be talking about some really I don't want to say really heavy, but I think that it's very important to address healing from loss and grief. This topic actually came up as Renee was reaching out to everybody and just recognizing how much loss people are going through, how much transition we are all going through in this world, and being able to create a healthy path for you in transforming and healing from loss and grief. So this is really about navigating change. Change is inevitable. There's this statement, it's very cliche, but I still love it because it's so true. The only thing constant is change. And we're going to talk about the different forms of change. We are going to talk about how we can heal from that, how we can learn from that, and the different avenues that we have taken. So I know that this might not be like a whoa, I'm gonna, exciting topic. It's a necessary one because I don't want to, and we don't want to just ignore some of the hurt and the pain and the heaviness in the world. We want to address it, and we want to give you the steps that you can take to actually create transformation in your life with this happening. So who's with me? Put a yes in the comments. Are you ready to use your loss and your grief to transform your life rather than control it? Because what can happen is that we just allow it to consume us. I'm experiencing this, or I have experienced it, within my family, of just like, it's just so consuming. And then that becomes your world. And it's all this process, right? So maybe you're not in the space to be ready to be like, yes, Leanne, let's transform this. Maybe it's more of just curiosity. So you're here for a purpose, and just being able to be present for whatever that purpose is, because we really have a lot of transformational and really powerful tools for you to use, and different mindsets and soul sets to shift around that change that's happening in your life. And I'm actually going to talk about the several different areas of change that we go through. And many of them are not even recognized, that people have to go through this grieving process, and being able to just honor that process. So we'll go into some of that too. So really the goal here is to provide you with the practical tools and the strategies in order to navigate change, healing from that loss and grief, and transforming your life positively. So by acknowledging and working on the grief, we can actually pave the way for healing, which leads to more resilience and a brighter future, just like a more hopeful and wholeful future. So how does that sound? Put a yes in the comments if you're ready for that. For healing, for resilience, a brighter future, a more whole future. And this is where it's really important to recognize that, yes, I'm going to be giving you the 3 steps to transform and heal. Yes, we are going to go through key aspects. What's really important to recognize, that there are 5 stages of grief, right? I mean, most people do. And, 5 stages of the grieving process, but it's not this beautiful step-by-step process. It never, ever is, right? It's truly like, I think of it as like this ping pong ball going back and forth between like who you were, your identity, everything that was tied to that, like when you were with this person or in this situation or whatever, the relationship, when, who you were with this person essentially, and who you are without this person. And we're constantly, vacillating between the two and bouncing back and forth. So it's not this step-by-step process. There are steps that you can take, and it's important to be aware of all of those steps. So again, a difficult conversation, a necessary conversation, one that is not meant to be ignored or avoided, because it will come out all over the place. So I always say, it's like, if we don't deal with these emotions, if we don't deal with the reality of the situation, we are either going to implode or explode, right? where it's the implosion is more of like that depression that we hold on to, the anxiety that we hold on to, and the explosion is the anger and the resentment. But sometimes that can be the implosion as well. So, I mean, I'm working with somebody who, we're writing a forgiveness letter to herself because we can be so critical of ourselves. So, anyway, just a little tidbit side information. We are going to, and how does this even create, like, this is all about legacy foundations, creating our legacy. Well, we want to be able to create our legacy from an authentic place, which is really being able to address all of our emotions, all of our human emotions, recognizing that that's there, because when we don't address them, when we don't acknowledge them, it creates more hurt, and that leads us further away from authentic living. And when we're building our authentic life, we these emotions are there. Let's just identify them and accept them. So we're going to go into that. So that's really our goal for today. So let's talk about these significant areas impacted by unresolved grief, right? When we look at this, there are really strong impacts on us, our life, our family. So the first one that I want to identify is that emotional well-being. That's the first significant area impacted. When we're not taking care of our emotions, when we're not staying curious about them and recognizing them and acknowledging them, it leads to long-term emotional distress, right? When you think about it, I just identified that it's depression, it's that anxiety, it's the feelings of isolation, right? I've watched, people in my family go through this as our father passed, my mom's husband, right? Lifelong partner, and watching it, and so many, there's so much loss in the world. And it's, when we don't identify it, it leads to these long-term effects, right? And I know you've heard me say this before, but if you're new, you will hear me say this, is that pain is inevitable. We're going to go through loss in this life. We're going to go through change and transition. So pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. How long we suffer with that is completely up to us. And this is why it's important to go through these steps. Or these, this process, I'll call it instead, this process of healing. But our emotional well-being is significantly impacted. When we don't address these, we really create this like almost creating a glass ceiling for ourselves of the amount of joy that we allow ourselves to experience, the amount of love, the amount of compassion. Because when we have that unresolved grief, we close up. I close up my heart. I become hardened. It can be, again, that anger, resentment, the depression, anxiety, and just feeling so alone. We're not meant to feel that way. We're meant to feel more joy and more expansion. So that's one very significant area impacted by unresolved grief. Another one that I don't know if enough people talk about is how it comes out physically, how it comes out somatically. Grief can manifest physically and often does, especially again, when it's unresolved. It could lead to, in some of the different cues or clues that you will have if you are really, holding on to some unprocessed grief, is looking at, you might have headaches or fatigue. It might weaken your immune function, right? And it could even, you might have physical symptoms in your heart, in your stomach, in your hips. Just a tidbit of information for all of my women out there is that women carry trauma in their hips, quite a bit of trauma in your hips. So any like hip problems or stiffness in your hips, you're holding on to stored emotions. If you have not ever like read, now this is sort of like a dry read, a heavy read, is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessar van der Kolk. And he is like the guru of trauma and somatic symptoms and how the body actually holds on to trauma and unresolved emotions. We have mental markers of the experiences. We also have physical markers of the experience. So it's so important to be in tune with our body. Lower back is definitely, it's that, so that's, lower back is our difficulty feeling safe. That is, if we're looking at the energy centers, that's our root chakra, is right towards like the base of our spine. It's actually at the perineum, but when we have those lower back problems, it's because we lack a sense of safety. There might be feelings of instability, fear of, what's going to happen next and things like that. So I know. And of course, right, we don't want to ignore the medical stuff. Like I carry pain in my hips, and I also had hip dysplasia when I was born. I was in a cast for a very long, like for the first 6 months of my life, from the hips down. So I know that I'm already susceptible to that, but I know that like, if my hips are really, it's a different feeling, and knowing that I have to stretch them, and that releases that. But anyways, I can get off of topic. Wait until I am 40. I'm past 40. Oh my gosh. So funny. I love seeing the chats. All right. So that physical health, but yeah, that Body Keeps the Score is a great, great book to go more in depth about that. And just how it does impact us. But, it can show up somatically in so many different ways, right? So just being aware of that. Another area that's greatly impacted by our unprocessed grief is relationships. Okay. Why is this? Because we are holding on unprocessed grief. We close out our heart. We can sometimes lash out or isolate ourselves. We cut off communication, or maybe we're a little snappy. There's so many things that go through these relationships. So that's just, like friendships and things like that, or, loved ones who are around you. And that's just your unprocessed grief. Now, there's a whole different realm of like when you're dealing with an actual death in the family that like really can tear, families apart. I know that you may have seen it or even experienced it yourself. And there's just a lot comes up that if we haven't processed through any of our grief from before, it's going to come up again. Right. So openly, this is really important to be able to understand other people's process too. But it strains relationships with family, friends, colleagues, if your grief is left unaddressed. Right. Again, that's where that explode is, right? When we're just like, again, we either cut people off because we feel so isolated, or we're so depressed and we just don't want to be around anybody, but we also feel so alone and like nobody understands us. So really being able to be in tune with that emotion and being able to communicate it. Okay. So those are the 3 areas, significant impact with unresolved grief. So anybody ever experienced that? I saw some in the chats of like, looking at what does the pains and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm so glad that makes sense. So the next thing I really want to address is the different types of loss. Okay. There are so many forms of loss, so many different changes that happen. I'm going to highlight a couple that are more pertinent to this discussion. But I'm also going to mention a bunch of others because I want you to have that awareness that that shift, that change in your life is really important to pay attention to and to honor whatever it is that you're going through. So when we look at this, we look at, the types of loss. Of course, there's like the glaring one that's like the loss of a loved one through death. That's the one that we kept on coming up on, like as we were reaching out, as Renee was reaching out to everybody, she's like, oh my goodness, there's so much loss. Do we have anything on that? I'm like, I don't think so, but let's do it. Let's create it, right? So there's the loss of a loved one through death. There's also the loss of a pet, where truly not enough, I don't believe enough people talk about. I remember meeting somebody at one of the networking events I was at, and I wish I could remember. I think it might be over the rainbow or something like that. She wrote a book. She was a lawyer. She still is. She wrote a book though when she lost her dog. And gosh, I wish I could remember. I feel like there's another word that I'm missing, but it's something over the something rainbow. And and she just talked about, like, our pets are our family. They're with us for, you know, over a decade sometimes, right? And being able to recognize the loss of a pet, that there's also getting a new pet, like that's a transition too. But really looking, and I think it's becoming more and more just like accepted that, like, yes, this is part of our family, and yes, I'm really struggling with this. Goodness, in my earlier years, I did not even, like, I remember finding my dog. She was so young, and she had heart problems. And I woke up to, she passed away. I woke up and she was at the foot of my bed, underneath, or like at the side of my bed. And I just remember, like, I was in such shock. I was very young and I was just like in shock. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Buried her, went to work. Talk about not dealing with your grief. And I had a meeting with my boss at that time. For some reason, I can't even remember what it was. We had a meeting and I just remember looking at him and I'm like, I just buried my dog. And like, it just hit me. He's like, what are you doing here, Leanne? I was like, I don't know. I don't know. So it was just, and of course going home and just like allowing that and talking to my husband. But anyways, like I wanted to identify that. And then another type of loss is change in relationships. This one I thought was so important because, we do recognize, I believe, and what I notice anyways, is that it's more recognized when you physically lose somebody, but not really when there's a change in the relationship. Does that make sense? Put a yes in the comments, right? So a change in the relationship is so, so important to recognize. This could be a change in a friendship. Maybe a friend has moved away. Maybe your friend has been going through challenges, so you don't really see them as often. Maybe your friend is in a new relationship and she's, not, or he is not as available as they used to be. Another is like a change in family relationships, daughter, son, like maybe they left for college or they moved away, or they're just getting older, right? Or maybe they're getting married or breaking up with somebody. There's all these changes that happen in relationships that we don't give enough acknowledgement to, right? So those are the three types of losses I really wanted to like just focus in on and like make sure, because again, this is all part of this, from loss and grief. So the other is just like your divorce, a breakup, moving, starting a business, leaving a business, growing a business to a new level. Even I remember one of the like live sessions that I did, like I just popped on and I was just like going through it because I was in the process of leaving corporate and going into my business. And it was just so important for me to talk about like the grieving process around leaving something that I knew for, at that time, 15 years, and the people that I knew, and going out and venturing on my own, even though it was really, really exciting for me. And that's something that I chose to do and wanted to do. There's still a grieving process, a move. Right? When you think about that, I wanted to move back home. We were in Georgia for 20 years and then decided to move back to New York. And there was a grieving process there. So again, just really important to recognize that. Also looking at health issues that affect you, that affect your ability to live day to day, like health issues, someone close to you, stopping addiction, grieving process there. Okay. So, which ones are you currently going through, or which ones have you gone through in the last 6 to 12 months? You can list them out individually, or you can just put the number, like how many of those have you gone through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, right? Which ones have you gone through? Really just identifying it. Yeah. Outgrowing friends. Absolutely. Right. There's all this. So which ones are you currently going through, or which ones have you gone through within the last 6 to 12 months? I want you, and put it in the comments, I want you to really identify this so that you can just offer yourself some compassion and acknowledge and see like everything that you have gone through. Because again, we often breeze past these. So just put that in the comments and just recognize that and acknowledge it for yourself. So I want to identify the like 3 steps of any transition process. Right? When we're going, there are 3 parts of this. And again, just like the stages of a change, you can vacillate between them, right? You can move from denial to anger to acceptance and back to anger and up to acceptance. And it's the same thing with this, but really what we're looking at is like we spend a lot of time in the limbo stage, but I'll tell you what that is. So when we're looking at this, there's 3 steps of any transition process. The first one is that step 1 is the ending, right? Something in our life that has been part of our day-to-day experience has ended, right? We're grieving the loss. We're feeling anxious. We're feeling overwhelmed. That's the first part of it, right? So with that, then the second part of it is step 2 is limbo and the potential incubator. This is where we have really left behind the old, but we have not yet stepped into the new, right? We're disoriented a lot because things have really been destabilized. This is the time to be very, very patient with yourself and very patient with your process. This is the most uncomfortable stage. You would think that the ending is. It's not. This is the most difficult stage, okay? So being able to recognize the stage that you are in, right? And being able to recognize and give yourself compassion is going to be really important. This is where a lot of people can actually go back into some of our conditioned patterns. Sometimes we go back into addiction. Sometimes we go into anger and frustration and anxiousness and overwhelm. So sorry, multitasking here. So when we are doing that, it's important to stay in the space where we stay compassionate and we stay curious about ourselves. This is a place where you want to do a lot of that healing. You want to come to yourself as the loving, wise adult. If you don't know this language, reach out to me, reach out to Renee. We could probably send you a training on all of it. And this is a really vulnerable time. So being able to utilize some of the processes, I know I have a whole module within my coaching program that goes through so many different ways to heal this part. And I'm going to go over a couple for you, just a couple techniques for you today so that you have something to take with you and begin utilizing it immediately. Okay. So being able to recognize like when we are in that incubator process and allowing yourself to, again, go through it, but know that you're not going to stay in it forever. So utilize, this might be a time where you reach out to a therapist. If you don't have a therapist yet, this is a time where you can reach out to your coach. This is definitely a time to get, again, allow the space for healing. because then you move into the third step, which is the new beginning, right? This is when you really step into the new that has been like percolating in step two. It can be a new beginning that is unconsciously created from old patterns, right? So this is where people can really get into possibly like say you're getting out of a relationship, right? You might go back into another relationship and continue those same patterns. You might, move forward and continued addictive patterns. I don't ever ask people like, are you addicted? It's just like, what are you addicted to? Right? We're all addicted to something. So what we want to make sure of is that this new beginning is really created from our authentic self, right? That was envisioned in thoughtfulness, consciousness, right? And leads to more expansion and aliveness. So I want to give you an example of my own, right? Excuse me. I've been talking a lot this morning. So an example of my own is when my dad passed. It was in 2019. And I remember the first, going through the first step of just end, right? The ending, which really it was obviously my dad passing away when I was in Georgia and he was here. I had just gotten back from a trip to come and see him, and things took a turn for the worse pretty quickly, and I wasn't able to get there in time. And I just remember I was on FaceTime when he passed away, and I was crying on my back porch, and I was just looking up at the stars, and I was, just allowing myself to be in that space. And that space, I mean, like the ending lasts. It's not just one night. So it, carried on through his, through his funeral, and even through my sister's wedding, which was like a month after that. So allowing yourself the space to just grieve in that space too when the ending happens, right? Step two for me, right, was looking at this is that limbo, right? That incubator, the limbo stage, that's very difficult to go through. And I remember the smallest things triggering me, right? I remember just being really sensitive during that time. And it was like, I don't even, fixing my house and doing things like that, like calling my dad was not an option anymore, or just making fun of him, or, all of those things. There was so much, in this space, there was some guilt for moving away. There was, not enough time. Like I didn't call him enough and not spending enough time with him. And there was just, again, it's like, and I'm still living my day to day. So it's this bounce back and forth. And I just remember this moment where, this is a great example of being in this stage, this moment where I put together, my mom bought a foosball table for Christmas for us, for the kids. And I remember putting it together, and I put it together wrong. And I flipped it over, and I was just like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Ed, my husband, I'm like, can you please help? I put it together wrong. He was like, I'm not the one that wanted it. You can put it together. You can figure it out yourself. And I just started crying and crying. And I just remember looking at him and being like, I would ask my dad, but I can't. Right? That's a time when I would have FaceTime my dad. So anyway, that was in that like back and forth and back and forth. And then finally in the new beginnings, it's like, I know I have this solid knowing that he is with me, that he is supporting me, that he knows I love him, that, like we have that bond, and to be grateful for everything. Right. So it's so important to recognize that. And I just wanted to give that story, that example for those of you, maybe going through this process as well. So I want to get into, and can you guys relate to any of that? If you're in it, which one are you in right now, right? Are you in the new beginnings? Are you still in the limbo? Are you in the ending part of it? Put it in the comments. Let us know. So that we can support you. And then finally, I want you to walk away with a couple different techniques. So there are 3 powerful exercises to help guide and move you through the process. Now, in my coaching program, I have a whole long sheet of like releasing checklist and then like the releasing process for everything. It's again because it's so important to be able to honor that time and then to know how to move through it, right? We know how to move it through it possibly in unhealthy ways, but what about in a healthy way? So when we're looking at this, these are just a couple of exercises. So the first is that it's more of a mindset, but it's like, I'm going to encourage you to get into like a meditation or just like set aside some time for yourself to look at the awareness, bringing it to awareness, right? Bringing it to awareness. What stage am I in? What is happening? How am I feeling, right? Acknowledging that it's still there, acknowledging the stage that you're in, the phase that you're in, acknowledging the emotions that are coming up, whether it is anger, whether it is guilt, like whatever that is for you, just acknowledging it. And then really accepting that you have all of these emotions, accepting that you're going through the grieving process, accepting that this person is no longer here. That's a whole process in itself. But really, when you set aside some time for like quiet meditation, journaling, or something like that about the awareness, the acknowledgement, and the acceptance, that gives you the space. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, it gives you space. 5 minutes, it gives you space. Okay. Which brings us to number 2, setting aside time. So the first one is truly awareness and acknowledgement and acceptance. But number 2 is setting aside that time that I was just saying. Now, when you do this, again, you can do this in journaling for yourself and your own emotions. You can also, this is a powerful exercise to actually set aside 15 minutes a day. Okay. 15 minutes a day to sit down and just offer yourself the opportunity to recall moments that you had with this person that you lost, or the pet, or, whatever transition you're going through. Just allow yourself to be in that space, giving yourself permission, setting aside that time to give yourself the permission to honor. There was somebody that I had worked with, a woman I had worked with, a couple years ago. I remember she was grieving over the relationship she had wanted with her mother. It was a very toxic relationship, and she found herself continuing in this resentment over and over and over, and the frustration, and she didn't like how she was feeling. So what she did was set aside time, 15 minutes every day, and you can turn on music, a candle, like you can, light a candle, whatever's going to help you. But she set aside 15 minutes a day to read her mother's biography. And the healing process that went through that was phenomenal. So setting aside time. The third powerful exercise that you can do to help you guide you and move you through this process is holding a releasing ceremony, right? So oftentimes it's, I did this during our retreat in Sedona. I do it in most of my retreats as a releasing ceremony, writing down everything that you're holding on to, any hurt, any frustrations, everything that you want to release, everything that is no longer serving you. So maybe it is the resentment that you hold. Maybe it is that anger, the frustration. Maybe it's the frustration towards yourself, towards the other person. Whatever it is, you write it all down. This is just one type of releasing ceremony. You can write it all down and you can burn it. Fire is so cleansing. It's so cleansing. It's used in a lot of shamanic traditions and ceremonies. So this is just another one that you can do. So those are the 3 powerful exercises to guide and move you through this transition process, right? Navigating change. So being able to know what to do with this is so important. Again, this is all towards your journey of authentic living, of really, really allowing yourself to rise to higher levels of joy. Because when we're holding on to the sadness, when we're holding on to the grief, we can't even allow ourselves to feel the joy, the higher levels of joy. So that's all the information I have for you today. Ceremony for your grandmother. Absolutely beautiful. New Year's and moon eclipses. I love that. Yes. So those are the exercises. And again, for all of you beautiful trailblazing souls who are going through transition process, who are experiencing loss and great losses, I hope that this was beneficial for you. I hope that, again, allowing yourself the space to understand your grief and to get curious about it, and then to know the tools to move through it, it allows you to rise to your highest self, to have more clarity of what that mission is and your vision, your values in life, and to be fully present in your life because it truly is a gift. So, if you are interested in more learning of just different ways that we can align with our authentic self, that we are aligning with our legacy every single day, getting out of our own way, being able to see what's possible for us, right? Because again, when we release grief, we actually see what's possible. We see the beauty in things again. Please, please, please join us for the 5 days of breaking barriers and building your legacy today. We have a 5-day workshop coming up in March. So beginning March 4th, the 5-day workshop will kick off and you are going to want to be there. There are so many powerful transformations that happen within that 5-day workshop that really align you to being the biggest and best version of yourself and to really carry out that mission and live your legacy today. So sending so much love, so much joy, and I am excited to see you during next week's training.